back to another video, and today we're going to continue our trend of learning how to develop for OpenBVE. Now last time we were here, what we did was we basically made ourselves our own object, and we learned about how the scaling works in BVE. So if you haven't watched that video yet, go check that out, because that's going to be pretty helpful in helping us get to where we need to go in order to become successful BVE developers. Now, I saw in the comments that a bunch of you guys asked for a more in-depth tutorial on how to make station objects. So that is what we're going to go over today. Now, as usual, you're going to need your object viewer, and you're also going to need Notepad++. So if you don't have both of these things, I'm going to put these in the description at the end of the video. If you don't have Notepad++ and you don't have object viewer, you should have it with your base OpenBVE. If you don't have these things, make sure you download the links in the description. Now, I'm using the latest version of BVE, which currently right now is 1.8, but any version 1.7.1.8 or later will do. Now, first things first, we're going to create a new object. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to rename this, and I'm going to make this object for tutorial, and we're going to save as, because this is the most important step. We're going to save as in our BVE object folder. All new objects that you create must be saved in your object folder, because if you save it anywhere else, it's not going to work for this video. So for simplicity, or if you save it anywhere else, you're also it's not going to work at all. You won't be able to use it, won't be able to see it, in case you need to load objects from other folders containing in this object folder. So this is very important. This is your database. It's basically your core. It makes up BVE. What BVE is, what routes you're able to play, all comes through this object folder. So if you don't have this folder, you need to make it, and it has to be inside the legacy content. This folder cannot be anywhere else but the legacy content. So for this tutorial, I'm going to be saving this object here, this folder named Kentrel, and I'm going to save that. Now, this is a very important step. In order for us to load this object here, because remember I told you guys in the last video that the only way you can load stuff in BVE is if they're in the correct file format. So I'm going to basically open this up, and we need to rename this .txt to a B3D and not a CSV, for simplicity's sake, because we could do this in CSV format, but just for the sake of this video, we're going to name this B3D. Click yes, and there you go. So we're going to open this new object. I'm going to get rid of this one, this old one, and there we go. Now, if you remember, well, actually, I'm going to ask you guys, what was the first thing that we typed here in this very first line to get us started with building an object? I told you guys this in the first video. If you typed in Mesh Builder, you're correct. The very first thing that we need to type here is Mesh Builder, the way we're going to build our object. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to build a basic square. And just for simplicity's sake, if you always need to verify, you can always just look at another object that we have here if you want to make sure that what you've done here is correct. It all depends on your preference. So just gonna leave space, something like that, something light, and let's go ahead and open this in our object viewer. Ignore all this nonsense that I have open here right now. We don't need that. What we need is our object. And it should load, and there we go. So let's just put the grid on. And here we go. So we have a square. We have our basic square. And I'm going to adjust the coordinates here just to make this a little bit longer. Let's just make that slightly longer, slightly taller, and slightly longer. Here we go. So now we have a basically big enough square for you guys to work with. Now, in this video, we're going to cover making a basic wall. We've partly covered this in our first tutorial. So we're just going to continue from there. In order to make a picture appear on this square, we need something that's called a texture. For those of you who are relatively new and have no background knowledge of BVE whatsoever, a texture allows you to load in things like images within your object folder, and you can make these images appear to be something that you can use in your game. But there's a catch that comes with this. In order for you to use a texture, it has to be in the same folder that your object is in. So I can't just take something from one of these folders, for example, and expect it to load there. It's not going to work like that. So I'm going to just copy an image, and I'm going to paste it in here so we can use for this tutorial. So let's just grab this name, and let's just do load that. And then we need to do our coordinates, as you can see from this example that I have here. The coordinates align with your face and how many shapes you have, how many numbers you have here in your face. So in this case we have 4. So I'm going to type coordinates 0, 0, coordinates 0, 1, coordinates 1, 1, coordinates 1, 0. And let's see what happens. So if I change the background here, what you are seeing is that the image is loaded, but it's not loaded correctly. It's kind of just a little zoomed in. Let me move closer so you can see. It's kind of zoomed in. It's looking a bit unaligned. All that means is that you go in here and adjust your coordinates. So maybe 1 just won't work. Maybe we need to make this 2. And let's see what happens. No, we actually have to make this smaller. Let's make this a decimal value. Let's just change our x coordinates to 0.5 and see what happens. This is all about trial and error here. What works for someone else might not work for you, depending on the way that you've constructed, depending on the way that you've built your object. So if it's looking a little bit grim, a little something like this, then you just have to keep You just have to keep working with it. So I'm just going to keep adjusting these little by little. And I also actually have this exact form that I need. I actually have a shape that I built with this example that's going to uses the texture that I need. So let me just open the correct one up. Yeah, I'm gonna just copy this little mesh build here just to show you guys. I'm gonna paste it here, and I'm gonna show you what we get out of it. What we get is a perfectly labeled logo. So honestly, it really depends on your scenario. But this is how you would make a basic station object. And if you really need to, you can these numbers, these coordinates all really come, you just have to really keep adjusting them. There's not much you can do. If I go back to the other example, there's not much you can really do here. You just have to keep going with it. Let me adjust these numbers some more. Make this 1, 2, 3, and let me just correct these. That was actually my mistake. I messed that up for myself. Let me just redo that, because I remember I did say they align with the numbers, and I forgot to label that part. So let's redo that entirely. So here you go. There it is. With the object that I just made just now, one important thing is you need to include coordinates 1, coordinates 2, coordinates 3, and then your x and y. Because if you did what I did back there, that was a mistake I made. But if you did that, you're gonna get some, I don't know what that was. It still worked. It was still there, but it's not quite what we wanted. But here it is. This is the angle that it was built, so obviously you're not going to be able to really rotate it unless you rebuild the square. But that is it. That is how to make a basic station wall. And while we're here, we can also cover making basic, pillars and things like that. Those are a little bit more complicated though. So let's get rid of, let's actually keep this texture, but let's change elements of our square. Instead of making our height is actually pretty good, but we're going to change our height to 4. And we're going to change our vertex, our z coordinate, to about 2. When making pillars, and actually we're going to make it 1. When making pillars, these are actually not too big in real life. They're actually about this size. And this is just one face of a, basic pillar that you would make. If you wanted to do all sides, it's pretty simple. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate this part, and I'm just going to change the starting point. So what we did here is we're going to change this so that it's on the x-axis now. But basically what we did here is that instead of rising up 4, we're going to keep the rising up, but our x is going to change. Our x is going to change here. We're going to make the x 1, and the z's are going to stay at 0. We're going to keep our trend together. So basically, 0, 0, 0, we're going to have 0, 4, 0, 1, 4, 0, 1, 0, 0. we'll see what happens. Let's see. There we go. So it's on this side. We need to do the same thing again. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this, and instead of the x-axis, we're going to do this along the z-axis. So our x values are going to be changed back to 0, and we're going to change this to z instead. And oops, I didn't save. Let's double check this. We have 0, 0, 0, 0, 4, 1, or no, 0, 4, 0, 0, 0. Nope, our x needs to be edited, not the z. We're going to change our x's to negative 1. We need it to be on the opposite side of, we need our x's to be on the opposite side of the equation. Now it's not the x, it's the z that has to be changed. The z needs to start at -1 and stay at -1 the whole time. So I'm going to just edit these again. So -1, -1, and then -1, -1. Because if our z's stay at -1, what we want it to do is just not move from here. It needs to do the same thing that it would normally do, except just not move an inch. So that disappeared. And we're going to change this to 1 again. Change this to 1 so we can coordinate. This is not really working. Hold on. Let's do some adjustments. So this is 0, 0, 0. Our first one is on the z. It's first one at z is 1, 1. And we need everything to stay at 1. So we need to keep it 0, 0, 1. 0, 4, 1. We need to do 1, 4, 1 and 1, 0, 1. There we go. So we have basically half of our box complete. But now here's the catch. The catch is that normally we could just put another little box here, but that's not what we're going to do. So in order to create the last pillar, we need to copy this mesh builder. But we also need to change the coordinates so that the height is different. The height cannot be 4. And we need to keep it so that it starts at 0, 0, 1, or 1, 0, 0 on the x. Then it needs to do 1, 4, 1, 4, 0, then 1, 4, 1, and 1, 0, 1. This actually works out well. But the new height, we need to decrease the height to about 2. By decreasing the height to about 2, we have control over how tall our pillar is. And actually I'm going to put it at 1 because that's the correct scaling in real life. The pillar height is about 1. We're not quite done yet though. There's still a couple of things that need to be done here. Now, to close off the square, we would normally, put a little height on it. But that's actually not what we're going to do here. What we need to do is we need to mess around with these coordinates, because the next thing we need to do is we need to create a slanting block, a little slant that's going to go up a little bit. And in order to do this correctly, we need to have our, coordinate for what we just made. So we're gonna start at 1, 0, 0. The height 1, 1, 0. The height has to remain at 1, but we actually need to change this value here of x. It has to become 2 in order for this to really work. You see how it creates a slanted effect? This is what we needed to do, but we needed to do in the opposite direction. So instead, we're going to make this value 0 so that you guys can really see the correct slanting pattern. So now in order for it to be authentic, the height needs to stay at 1 for the whole block. And now that the height is at 1, we can change these ones, we need to change these zeros here. We need to change the 1s to 2s again. So it's going to raise up to the power of 2 instead of 1. How cool is that? You see how we've just created something so level here. Now that it's at height of 2, well, we're going to grab the first ever block that we've made at the top over here. Let's bring this all the way down. And instead of starting at 0, we're going to start at 0.5. We need to start at 0.5 so that it aligns directly in the middle, but everything else stays the same. This coordinate, this will actually not end up leaving 0.5 at all. It's going to stay at 0.5 the whole time, but keep its same coordinates. It's just that the x is going to be different. And, well, there's the final result. Here's how we created a basic station pillar using basic objects. And if you really want it to be a little bit more funny, let's change this to 0.7 so it's a little bit closer. You can change this to be at 0.7 so that it looks a little bit better, because we don't want it directly at 1. But let's edit this, and then let's edit the other blocks. Let's edit the length to be 0.7. And what we're basically going to achieve perfection here. There we go. 0.7, we have a little bit of a block made here. And now, the other thing is that we could probably extend this brick to be a lot longer than it should be. And actually, we can do that right now. With this tutorial, we can also do that and extend this part to be correct, so that it represents an actual really small pillar. Now, if this doesn't really bother you, then it's okay. Nothing really wrong with it. But if this does bother you, you can always change it. You can always make a base, make another block in this specific area, and then just extend it. But from a standpoint, here's how you make station objects. We're going to go into more in depth in the next video, but if you enjoyed this tutorial, please hit that like button, subscribe. Our goal right now is to get to 350 subscribers. And when we hit 350 subscribers, there's going to be a big drop. So stay tuned. It's your boy Kencho signing out. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.